Mentioned there, the New South Wales Liberal Environment Minister Matt Kean has said that there is a direct link between the current bushfire situation and climate change. I caught up with him just before we came on air. Matt Kean, thanks for joining us. What evidence do you have that links the current bushfires to climate change?
G'day, Chris, and thanks for having me. The first thing I want to say is thank you to the amazing volunteers out there on the front line at the moment, putting themselves in harm's way to protect the rest of us. They are doing an incredible job in very, very difficult conditions. I also just want to say that our thoughts and prayers are with the communities affected by these bushfires. They are having a devastating impact across New South Wales at the moment, and we hope that everyone's okay. But Chris, in answer to your question, the scientists in my department have said that we're seeing more extreme weather events. We're seeing hotter summers, we're seeing drier winters, we're seeing some of the worst drought conditions in living memory. This is what the scientists have been warning us about for decades, and saying that these extreme weather events are the result of climate change.
We know it's one of the worst droughts on record, but we also know that the most eminent climate scientists in Australia say that this drought can't be directly linked to climate change, that there's been no long-term drying pattern in the rainfall records in Australia. So how can you overrule them and try and blame this drought on climate change?
Well, we're not overruling them, Chris. The scientists in my department, they've told us that this is the second hottest year on record for New South Wales. It's following last year, which was the hottest year on record for the state of New South Wales. It's not me saying these things, it's also the Bureau of Meteorology, which is saying that we're seeing more extreme weather events as a result of climate change that are leading to longer fire seasons and more severe fire situations. That's exactly what we're seeing. You cannot deny that more extreme weather events caused by climate change are having an effect on things like bushfire, and we need to, in denying it, it stops us from taking the appropriate action.
Well, no,
now, I'm not talking about taking action.
No, it doesn't actually. What we're talking about here is bad fire conditions. These are not unprecedented fire conditions. This is not an unprecedented drought. There might be a debate about the Federation drought, but it's a bad drought and it's a bad fire season, and you're directly relating them to climate change in a way that the experts have refused to do.
Well, that's not what I'm saying, Chris. What I'm saying is that the scientists, the experts, which you're talking about, have said that more extreme weather events are a result of climate change. And the extreme weather events I'm talking about are the fact that this is the second hottest year in the history of New South Wales. Last year was the hottest year in the history of New South Wales. We are going through a once-in-a-generation drought like we've never seen before. So to suggest that these are not extreme weather events is just ignoring the science and just ignoring the reality, Chris.
Well, no, it's not, because you just said once-in-a-generation drought. We know we've seen very bad droughts before, and we know about the Federation drought and the rest of it. So we know we've seen very, very hot summers in the past. We know we've seen very, very bad droughts in the past. We know we've always had to tackle this horrendous fire threat. And while this is a bad season, we've seen them before and we will see them again.
Look, I respect your opinion, Chris, but with due respect, you're not a scientist, I'm not a scientist. That's why I'm listening to the scientists that are saying that more extreme weather events are a result of climate change. Now, we need to tackle this issue, but we need to do it in a responsible way that grows our economy, creates jobs and sees more investment. And that's exactly what I intend to do, Chris.
Well, I listen to scientists, and my key source is Professor Andy Pittman, who's a world-renowned expert in this area, and he says there is not the data there to directly link this drought to climate change. And while all sorts of climate scientists might predict that in the future we will see more extreme weather events, that does not give people the right to link any weather event or weather-related event to climate change. It's a fairly big leap in logic, isn't it?
Well, Chris, I've been in touch with Professor Pittman and he's clarified his comments. He has said that there is a direct link between climate change and these bushfires. So let's listen to the scientists, let's listen to the experts, and let's take responsible and decisive action to deal with these challenges. I mean, what is the worst that can happen by us reducing our carbon emissions? We have less extreme weather events. That's a good thing. So, you know, there is a benefit in taking action, if not for the environment, then for our economy. Economies right around the world are decarbonising, and there is no country on the planet better placed to help them decarbonise than Australia. We have got an abundance of wind, we've got an abundance of solar, and we've got the supply chains and the trust around the world to be able to export that right around the planet. This will underwrite our prosperity for future generations. So this is just not an environmental play. This is an economic play that will create jobs, see investment in the regions, and underwrite our prosperity for future generations. And we cannot miss the opportunity to grab it with both hands.
But this is where you're now directly using the tragedy of bushfires to push your own political barrow, your own political policies on emissions reductions, whereas you must know, if you adhere to the science and the facts, you must know that these emissions reductions plans in New South Wales can do nothing to alleviate the bushfire threat in Australia.
Chris, with respect, that's a complete mischaracterisation of what I said. What I said is that we're seeing more extreme weather events. That's not me saying that. That's the Bureau of Meteorology. That is the scientists in the Department of the Environment that are advising these things. These are the experts in this field. We're listening to the experts, and we're saying that it's not just a threat for New South Wales, it's an opportunity. And it's an opportunity that I think we should grab with both hands, that will create jobs, see investment coming into New South Wales, and underwrite our prosperity for future generations. And if the byproduct of that is seeing less extreme weather events, then, Chris, that's a good thing.
Are you saying that your emissions reductions policies can help alleviate the bushfire threat in New South Wales?
No, I'm not going to have you putting words in my mouth, Chris. What I'm saying is that extreme weather events are a result of climate change, and we need to be taking steps to mitigate the impacts of climate change. We can do that in a responsible way that doesn't hurt our economy, that grows our economy, and that's what we intend to do. With regard to bushfires, we've got some amazing volunteers, and let's remember that they're volunteers out there on the front line, protecting the rest of us and keeping us safe. And that is a great thing, and we need to be thinking of them at this time. But we also need to be thinking about what we can do to stop this in the future. And one of the things that the scientists tell us we can do to reduce the impact of extreme weather events in the future is reducing our carbon emissions. And New South Wales can and will do its bit to meet our targets and obviously protect our environment whilst at the same time growing our economy. And I don't see how that's a bad thing, Chris.
Well, there you go again. You're talking about stopping bushfires in the future and relating that to your emissions reductions policies.
No,
therefore,
you're talking about that,
how can you
Chris. What I'm talking about...
No, you just said that. You just said we need to look at ways to stop this in the future.
No, I didn't say that, Chris.
And went on to these emissions reductions policies. Explain to me how and why any emissions reductions policies in New South Wales or anywhere else for that matter could possibly create summers in Australia where we are not confronted by these horrendous bushfire conditions. Conditions we've had from time immemorial and will always face in the future.
Sorry, I won't speak while you're interrupting me, Chris. What I'm saying is that the experts and the scientists have told us that more extreme weather events are being caused by climate change. And the experts are also telling us that we can address climate change by reducing our carbon emissions. And I'm saying that New South Wales should do its bit to reduce the carbon footprint that is causing extreme weather events. And if that leads to less extreme weather events, which leads to less extreme bushfire conditions, then why wouldn't we do that, Chris?
Well, you know, there's all sorts of reasons you wouldn't, but let's put all that to one side for a moment.
Well, feel free to give me one, Chris, because right now I think we should be doing our bit to protect our environment whilst at the same time growing our economy.
Global carbon emissions continue to rise dramatically. Global carbon emissions are continuing to rise dramatically. So for at least the foreseeable future, whatever New South Wales or Australia does won't impact on the environment. But let's address all that and hope that one day, someday in 20, 30 years' time, the world will stop increasing its carbon emissions. But the point about that is, even if they did that, you know Australia and New South Wales every summer would face the horrendous threat of heat and wind and bushfires. You can never alleviate that threat through your climate action, and it's creating a false hope.
Well, that's exactly why. It's not just about reducing our emissions, Chris. It's also adapting to the new reality. I mean, Australia is going to be facing more extreme weather events because of those factors you just said, increasing global emissions right around the world. So we need to not only mitigate climate change and our carbon footprint, but we also need to adapt to the new reality. And the new reality looks like these more extreme weather events. So we have a responsibility to do our bit to protect our community, and that's exactly what I intend to do, Chris.
So let's not pretend that we can get rid of Australia's horrendous fire season. Let's not pretend that the fire disasters of the 1930s and the 1950s and the 1960s and 2019 can be swept back to history. Let's just concentrate on managing bushfires, getting rid of them, and perhaps reducing some of the fuel that fuels them, one thing that is directly within our control.
Well, that's exactly what we should be doing. We should be adapting to the new reality, which is more extreme weather events, and that's part of dealing with the issue of climate change. That's what we intend to do. We can walk and chew gum here, Chris. We can protect our environment as at the same time grow our economy, and that's exactly what the New South Wales government intends to do.
Just finally, Matt Kean, will you release the scientific advice that you say has come from both Professor Pittman and your department directly linking the current drought to climate change?
We're very happy to do that. And in fact, I'll refer you and your viewers to the Bureau of Meteorology's recent climate report, which has said that
I'm aware of all that. That's all public already.
Carbon emissions.
But no,
and also,
you mentioned Professor Pittman changing
with respect, they're not opinion makers like you and I, Chris. They're scientists.
Yes,
and we should be listening to the scientists and the experts on this thing, and that's exactly what I intend to do.
Yes, all that bomb information is available publicly, but you referred to Professor Pittman directly contradicting the advice he put out publicly earlier this year. I'm just asking whether you can put that information into the public domain.
We'd be very happy to, but I'm sure Professor Pittman would be very happy to speak to his comments.
Thanks for joining us, Matt Kean.
Great to speak to you as always, Chris. Thank you.